Hey everybody, I'm Michael, I'm alcoholic. How's everybody doing? We're dwindling away here. The last few steps. Jan, how are you?
Fine. I'm on time.
I'm sorry?
I'm on time.
It's a rarity.
What's the next one?
Let's pray. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right. Anybody not get their fourth step done? Mitchell? You not yet? Are you working on it? Okay.
It's an honest program, guys.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thanks for being honest. Awesome. Johnny, did you get your fierce inventory done?
Me?
Yeah. Good. Good. So, last week we talked about step 8, and I thought it was a very good conversation. A lot of people asked me about the list that we talked about last week. If you want to go over that list again, we can. Or if you just want to kind of take a picture of it or something like that, I got it up here. Let's do tradition 8 real quick before we move on. Tradition 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or higher. Wait, that's 8. I'm sorry. We're going to do tradition 9. We did that last week. Tradition 9, each AA group needs the least possible organization. Rotating leadership is the best. The small group may elect its secretary, the large group its rotating committee, and the groups of a large metropolitan area their central or intergroup committee, which often employs a full-time secretary. The trustees of the General Service Board are in effect our AA General Service Committee. They are the custodians of our AA tradition and the receivers of voluntary AA contributions by which we maintain our AA General Service office at New York. They are authorized by the groups to handle our overall public relations, and they guarantee the integrity of our principal newspaper, the AA Grapevine. All such representatives are to be guided in the spirit of service, for true leaders in AA are but trusted and experienced servants of the whole. They derive no real authority from their titles, and they do not govern. Universal respect is the key to their usefulness. And so I just kind of want to, that's a long form, and the long form I think is better than the short form, in my opinion. It's a little bit more thorough, but I really want to talk about tonight that rotating leadership is the best. In regards to the least possible organization. And so what happens is, in my experience, and a lot of other people's experience, I'm guessing, is that we have a rotating leadership in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason that we have that is because what will happen if I don't rotate out of my position or you don't rotate out of your position, what almost inevitably happens just by the nature of not rotating is we start taking ownership of the position. I don't think there's nothing wrong with taking ownership of your membership in Alcoholics Anonymous, but when I start to believe that I can do it better than everybody else and nobody does it, and that's we're alcoholics and we're self-centered and we're ego-driven. And so we have a committee in our area that is a 10-year commitment, and sometimes it's longer. And what happens, it's a great committee by all means, and I'm sure they mean well, but what happens is nobody else has a say-so. None of the new people who are joining Alcoholics Anonymous in 2025, and things change. Things in our society change. All kinds of things change. And the new people are the closest to the fire, and they have the great, fresh, new ideas. The problem is there's those people with the new, fresh ideas, whether it be a new year or a couple years sober person, they don't have a voice. when it comes to that particular committee, because the committee is 10 years, and the people who's been on the committee for 10 years, they don't want to hear nothing from nobody else. There's nothing wrong with those people. There's something wrong with the rotating leadership. You see? And so if we're to rotate, even though I may be very good at making coffee, for instance, I could be the best coffee maker in the whole wide world, it's only going to be good coffee, because our traditions tell us that the enemy of the best is good, right? And so what would be more spiritually whole in regards to a simple surface position as making coffee would be allowing a new person to have that position, to take some responsibility, to have a commitment, to have a sense of belonging, you see? And so if I don't rotate, whether it be a treatment committee, I'm the chairperson of the meeting, the secretary of the meeting, whatever my position may be, if I don't rotate and hand that position off, then I'm going to start thinking I can do it better than everybody. And then what'll happen is inevitably I'll get sick. And so we rotate in Alcoholics Anonymous. Why? Because we have no leaders, but we're just trusted servants is all we are. There's no big I's and little U's. And I'm a big fan of the underdog. And what I mean by that is, most of you know my story. I got sober in an abandoned basement, in and out of jails and dunked and dipped and all that kind of good stuff. I did it all. And I didn't have nothing. I didn't have a position. I didn't feel good about myself. And then I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember when I was 6 months sober and they gave me the keys to the church to open the meeting. And to me, that was the biggest thing. I was so honored by being able to do that. And even though the home group decided to vote me in to be the person who opens up the meeting and set the meeting up, there were people who in Alcoholics Anonymous who said to me, "Who gave you the keys to open the church?" And I was like, I didn't understand. And so it's vitally important that all of us, we rotate. And so somebody else had been doing that job for a very long time. But what that did for me in early sobriety was huge. And so I'm an underdog. And what I mean by that is people like us low bottom alcoholics, we don't, sometimes we don't get a voice. Sometimes we don't think we have a voice. I think we all have a voice in Alcoholics Anonymous, traditionally speaking. I think, to give the new folks a position, to give them the chair, to be able to chair a committee. And so like at our home group, the primary purpose group, you'll see guys with a year or two sober chairing like the welcome home meeting and the poker runs and all these different events that we have. We have a lot of events at the primary purpose group, and one of the reasons for that was so the newer people can get busy. And so they can feel the part of doing something. They can be a small part of a great whole and have a sense of belonging where they're not normally they're gonna find it in other places, you see? But rotating leadership is the best. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay. Let's move on. Last week we talked about our 8-step making a list and becoming willing. And I really believe that the step reads, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. I really believe in making the list comes the willingness. I really believe that. And so a lot of times I think that we jumble up step 8 and 9, and I understand why. And I think we jumble up a few steps. I think we jumble up 4 and 5. They're different steps. I think we jumble up 6 and 7, 8 and 9, and 10 and 11. Them kind of get pushed together. And that's fine, by all means. But just to have a new experience and have a new experience, especially if you've been sober for a while, in your sobriety, I'm always amazed at and we'll talk about that next week, but step 10 and 11, they really get mixed together. And they're two different steps and they're two different experiences. And there's two whole different kinds of actions going on there. And so step 8 and 9 get jumbled up into one. And step 8 is simply making a list. It's not doing anything else but making a list. And so a lot of times we alcoholics, we want to try to figure everything out and try to control everything. And so we get to thinking about the amends and before we make the list. It's not asking you to think about the amends. It's just asking you to make a list. And so last week we highlighted some of the things that we may have missed. And some of them were like not keeping promises and not honoring your commitments and gossip and not being on time and unattentiveness and talking about relational things that we may overlook. And so to some degree, we have a tendency to look for these big, giant things that I've stole the money, or these big amends that we have, and we forget about these little subtle ones. And we talked about last week that nobody trips over mountains. We trip over molehills. And so if I have some of the things that we discussed last week going on and I just keep pushing them to the side or stuffing them is what I do, inevitably I'll get sick and I'll start to justify my behavior. And when I start justifying my behavior, I start getting sick. And so there goes my willingness. If I start justifying a little bit and I permit a little bit, then my alcoholism is just insatiable and it's gonna want more. And so it'll create a place inside of me that will permit more and more and more and more, and I'll get sick. And getting sick for some of us looks like isolation, misery, grumpiness, problems at home, blah, 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 blah. And if we're lucky, that's what that will lead to. And some of us will drink. Some of us will drink, depending on, the grace of God and where you're at in your sobriety. These things I believe are very important to consider. Paying your bills on time, blaming other people for your problems, skipping on work and your chores. There's a whole bunch of stuff we talked about last week. But if we are not aware that we're doing these things, then we're not going to obviously make amends for it. And so I think that the scariest, a lot of people get caught up on their fourth step, and I can understand why, in proportion to taking a drink in light of what's always happened for us. The fourth step is nothing, it's easy. And in light of what would happen if we were in this room to get a couple bottles of Jack Daniels and start drinking, what would happen later on tonight in Cuyahoga Falls would be crazy. You see what I'm saying? And so in light of taking a drink, writing a fourth step is very simple, very easy. Right? Big book is very clear. No one likes the self-searching, the so forth, so on. But with some common sense in regards to taking a drink, writing a fourth step is really not that big of a deal. And that awareness comes as a result of the steps leading up to the fourth step. If I really know that I'm powerless and I really know why I'm powerless, it's simple. I don't want to do it. I'm lazy. I'm slothful. I don't like the self-searching like nobody else. But it's a no-brainer. Do this or drink. It's very simple. But a lot of people get caught up in that. And I think a lot of people get caught up on the fourth step and are unable to. There's probably many, many reasons. But I believe the number one reason is probably because they don't understand what's going on in the first three steps. So, is it scary a little bit? Nobody likes doing it. We don't want to admit our faults to others. We don't want to look and see what happened to us, what we did in Vegas in 1973 that we'd never tell nobody about. We don't want to talk about that, and I understand that. But I think probably even scarier would be making amends. Making amends is frightening. Very, very scary. Sean. In my opinion, making amends is terrifying. It's terrifying. I've been living a life driven by self for most of my life, and having to admit I'm wrong and the humility it takes there. And the big book talks about later in the steps is the knowledge of his will and the power to carry it out. Praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. It's one thing to, and I think I was talking to Justin this week about this, but it's one thing, you'll go to a meeting and they'll be talking about resentments or fears, but you'll get some intuitions at the meetings because the meetings are very spiritual, right? They have their spiritual entity, right? So what our 12 and 12 would tell us. And so you'll be at a meeting, they'll be talking about fears or resentments or something like that, and you'll get a spiritual intuition saying, go, I don't know, you'll be led to do something, and you'll have the knowledge of God's will, but then you'll leave the meeting and you won't do it. Why? And the reason is because the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out are two different things. And we're so selfish and we're so arrogant and egotistical, I believe still for myself at times that I really believe I'm going to be able to have the power to carry out spiritual activities in my human strength. And I fall for that one a lot for some reason. I just fall for it all the time. I really do. And so if I fall for it a lot, I'm guessing that some of you do too. And same thing with the amends. Just if we focused in on our 8th step and we just made the list, we didn't think about making the amends. We didn't think about forming it or what the talk was going to be like or how scared we was to make it. And we just made the list. Just by making the list and not thinking about nothing further comes a willingness. Comes a willingness. It's the promise. And so have we looked at some of the smaller things? The justification in our lives. What things am I justifying in my life? Have we looked at some of the relationships that haven't been working out very well? You see, are we overlooking some things in our life by either our egos or our arrogance or our pride or whatever it may be, won't even allow me to put it down the list because I already got it figured out in my head. You see? And it's vitally important to just make the list. And so I know we're going to be talking about making amends tonight, but if you still have not made your list, I would encourage you to don't think about making the amends when you're making your list. Just make the list. Just make the list. In the big book, it says, remember, we said we'd go to any length to overcome alcohol. And this is one of them lengths. And making amends, as terrifying as it may be, it's the same story. In light of what would happen to me if I took a drink today, making amends is not, it just don't weigh. It just don't weigh. And so, I always have called somebody before I make amends. I've called my sponsor. If I couldn't get a hold of my sponsor, I've talked to somebody who's been down the road before me or another alcoholic to just get some insight on my amends. I think it's important to do that. Making appointments to make my amends, and we're going to structure our amends a little bit in regards to we write our list and then we write what our harms are done. And so we use index cards. I always tell my guys to get index cards, write down the name, what your harms are. I lied, I stole, I cheated, I whatever, inconsiderate about blah, blah, blah. And then after we confess our wrongs to whoever we owe the amends to, and then we ask a question. And the question that we ask is, have I left anything out? And we're inviting with that question because being driven by alcoholism and being driven by fear and being driven by selfishness, I've done so much stuff, I almost can't bring it all to my remembrance. And so if you have relationships that are close, families, friends, stuff like that, we're living in a way that we probably to some degree are daily hurting people. And so we can come up with these big ones, but we leave a lot out. And so I've been sober long enough to where people had owed me amends. I'm pretty busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I always have been to some degree, and I've had the opportunity and the privilege to have somebody else owe me an amend, which is cool. That I was thought of or considered enough, or that maybe it bothered somebody enough where they had to make the approach to me. And in a couple of things that I found out, I've learned a lot in people making the amends to me. I've learned a lot by making amends, but I learned a lot from people making amends to me. And one of the things I've learned is that, and so our big book is probably, it's been said that to be the second most spiritual book ever written next to the Bible. Controversial, I don't know if it's true or not, but the big book is very spiritual. Excuse me. And the big book would say that resentment is the number one offender. And from it stem all forms of spiritual disease, right? And so forth and so on. It uses words like fatal and poison and stuff like that. And so if that's accurate, it's accurate for alcoholics. And so if it's accurate for alcoholics at that depth, then my guess is resentment is very, very harmful to non-alcoholics. I'd have to draw that easy conclusion, right? And so when people have owed me amends, I've had people, in the 12, the big book's gonna say, a meager mumbling that I'm sorry will not fill the bill. It's not enough, in other words. And so what I've had happen is I'll give you one experience. I had a guy that I sponsored, and I couldn't, he wasn't taking my suggestions, he wasn't listening to the things I had, and he just was doing whatever he wanted to do. And I was going through a pretty tough time in my life, and I said, hey man, I got some things to do. I think you should get a new sponsor, someone that you can listen to. And he got mad. He did not like that at all. And he went and told people, I mean, he just run me through the mud. And I mean, it'd be one thing if he was just simply telling the truth about the poor things I do, but he made up stuff to add to it. You know what I mean? He legitimately was a very clear case of just slander. I had a very difficult time with that because I get mad at people and I don't necessarily behave that way. Not that I'm not sick as any other alcoholic, but my go-to for retaliation is not slander. My retaliation would be, I'm a little bit more assertive. Like I would like to run up to it or face it or, you know, call them a name or something. You know what I mean? I just seem to respond in that way. Where other people respond in a different way doesn't make them better or make me better. It's just different. I just don't have the understanding of slander because I've just not done it. And so inevitably, when I'm able to place myself in the people who's harmed me, and I'm able to place myself in their shoes, then I'm able to gain some kind of an understanding. But with the slander, I just didn't really get it. It was very difficult. I've heard people were calling me, and when you're busy in AA, you get, just kind of how it is. People called me over the years and told me some of the things that he had been saying, and it was very hurtful things, very just dishonest and hurtful things. A couple years go by, he calls me up one day and he says, I owe you amends. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we ended up meeting up at the Starbucks, and we sat down at the table, we got a coffee, and we chit-chatted for a bit, and he said, I said some things that probably wasn't true about you. And I already knew, obviously. He didn't say what the things were, and it was very shallow. Not to be judgmental by all means, but it was just very, very shallow. And my response to that was, I'll tell you what I want you to do. He said, what can I do to make it right? He knew enough to ask me that. I said, go to the people that you were dishonest to, tell them the truth, and then come and make your amends to me. I never heard from him again. Right? The reason I say that, not to be selfish, but to be authentic and sincere, is that the things that I was hearing that he had said, they hurt me. It was hurtful, right? I don't want to be a sissy or thin-skinned or whatever, but they were just, it was just very harmful things. And so I was hurt by that. And so if he would had said, I told this person this, and I told that person that, and he was direct. Remember what it says, made direct amends. He didn't don't beat around the bush. Don't mumble, I'm sorry. But if he would have been direct, I would have knew that he was serious. And I would have respected it more. And what would have happened in that deal, because I've had other people make amends where they were able to be sincere and direct. And what happened was it created a place for forgiveness. When I knew that they were serious about the harms that they had done to me, it created a place of forgiveness inside of me. It made it very easy for me to forgive them for what they had done. Does that make sense? They were very honest and very humble, and I knew it was hard. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a fool. I did stupid things. I know what it's like. And when they were honest and sincere in those things, it just opened the doors wide open for forgiveness. It made it very easy for me to forgive, right? On the other hand, when you come and say, oh, I said a couple things, blah, blah, I'm sorry. It's kind of cheap. It wasn't easy for me to forgive. Now I'm an alcoholic, and when somebody wrongs me, Big Book is pretty clear, whether fancied or real, resentments have the power to kill. And so as an alcoholic, I am responsible to work a program, to use the tools that I have to get to a place of forgiveness. That is my responsibility. That is my burden to bear. That is my spiritual responsibility. And so thank God for that. But when we go to those people that we have harmed, whether we think it's a big deal or not, it's important for us to be considerate in that way of how we hurt them. And it's important for us to create a place where the doors are very big. The forgiveness doors open wide open. And how I create that place in an amends environment is by being authentic, by admitting the things I've done wrong directly, by using our language. I was selfish, I was inconsiderate, I was frightened, and I did this, and I was wrong for that, and you trusted me, and I betrayed. It's my responsibility to be as direct in those amends as possible, because what I actually do is I create a place for the people I owe amends to. I create a place for forgiveness. And it's my responsibility as the person who caused the harm to create equal, in direct proportion to the harm done, equal or more opportunity to forgive. It's my responsibility to do that. And how do I do that? Directly. Direct amends. Meaning, here's what I did. Here's how I wasn't thinking about you. Here's how I was selfish. So forth and so on. It's vitally important to do that, folks. Vitally important. And so when we're out making our new amends, most of the folks in here have been sober for a while. You've been sober for a length, and it's super important for us to create that place of forgiveness in the people that we're making. We're trying to amend the relationship. We're trying. In my belief is that the amends are super powerful. And every time I've ever harmed somebody, a lot of times I've done it without even being aware that I'm doing it. I'm just so selfish in that way. And I heard a guy say, especially when we're drinking, I sold my soul to pay for the party. Now I got to buy it back. And how do we buy it back? We go buy it back by making the amends directly, by paying the money back. And so it's been said that when I harm you in any way, I compromise my integrity, my values, my morals, whatever I compromise in order to hurt you, what I actually do is I give a piece of myself away. I give a piece of myself away. And when I go authentically and directly to make these amends, I get a piece of myself back. Right? The Big Book says that at the moment we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I went to church yesterday. A couple people were there. Those here tonight. And the pastor was talking about the selfless, which I thought was ironic. And he talked about the biblical verse. It says, in like manner, husbands, honor your wives. I can't quote what it said. And it says, and if you don't, your prayers will be hindered. And I was like, oh, I was intrigued by that because I must have, I just never heard that before. And he went on to describe what that looked like. And he said, if my daughter got married, he said, someday my daughter will marry a boy. And if that boy mistreated my daughter and then came and asked me for something, I would be less likely to give it to him. And so that's completely applicable in all of our relationship. If we're all God's children and God has no grandchildren, we're all God's kids. And I hurt one of God's kids. I've hurt Steve, and I go to Steve's mom and say, hey, can I borrow $20? She's probably gonna be like, no, get the hell out of here. Right? But if me and Steve were cool and we were in a good relationship and I was jammed up, and she might be a little bit more prone to offer me that loan. You see? And so all these steps, we're not born on islands, folks. We're not all by ourselves in this world. We're all born into some kind of community. I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous, you got work, you got family. It's largely, this is all about our relationships. And we were talking earlier today that Alcoholics Anonymous is a funny place where you could be so cool and so you have the greatest relationship. You'd ride or die. You go to the trenches with somebody, and the next day it just changes. And we're like, how does that happen? Well, it's because alcoholism is powerful. Very powerful. And we are very inconsiderate. And alcoholism will not allow me to consider you and when I make my decisions. When I make decisions based on self, I inevitably hurt somebody, whether it be a simple inconsideration. It's very hurtful. If you have people that you're close to and they love you and you are always together and then you're not thought of in a particular situation, does that mean you got a right to be, to act any differently? No, but it hurts. It hurts. We all want to be accepted and valued and thought of and cared about, all of us equally. And so we are responsible for that. And the problem is, as I'm not going to be able to do that in my own strength. I have to have God's help. I have to take the 12 in this amends portion of the big book that's going to use the terminology, we take the bit in the teeth. Meaning we let the principles steer us to what we're supposed to do. If not, I'm going to walk through, I'm a tornado roaring my way through people's lives. That's just going to happen over and over and over again. The 12 and 12, I read something earlier today. It was pretty cool. It says, while we may be quite willing to reveal the very worst, we must be sure to remember that we cannot buy our own peace of mind at the expense of others. Meaning, I can't involve other people. I can't divulge information and things that involve other people to save my own skin. It's not appropriate. It's inappropriate to do that. Sometimes there's weird sexual problems and stuff like that. And usually or crimes committed. Usually in them two areas are where that really comes to play. I'm not saying it doesn't come to play in other areas and other amends, but a lot of times it's more harmful for me to involve somebody else in an amends that I may have done with somebody else, to involve that person without their consent to save my own skin to make these amends. It's not fair. It's not right. And God knows that. If God would, I don't believe God, it's in our literature, it's not appropriate for us to save our own skin at somebody else's expense. After taking this preliminary trial at making amends, this is really good, we may enjoy such a sense of relief that we conclude our task is finished. We will want to rest on our laurels. The temptation to skip the more humiliating and dreaded meetings that still remain may be great. We will often manufacture plausible excuses for dodging these issues entirely. Meaning, if you're an alcoholic and you start making amends and you start seeing how awesome amends making was, and you start to feel how cool it was, and you got a sense of wholeness, and you get a great amount of relief. And so what happens usually, not usually, but sometimes, is that I made some amends and then we just forget about the rest of them. We just act like they're not even there. And then what happens is we start placing things between me and making my amends. And what that means is a new relationship. If I have financial amends to make, how am I spending my money? Did I get myself into a lease or a finance? Did I get myself, so if I owe money for, I don't know, all the things I've done as an alcoholic and I go finance a vehicle, I believe I should have a vehicle? Absolutely. But how am I going to pay the money back when I'm to my last penny on this finance agreement? And so what I do is I place something before me in making my amends, which is very dangerous. It makes it harder and harder to make. And then what I'll start doing is I'm making excuses and I'll push it to the side and push it to the side and push it to the side. And when we do that as alcoholics, it just makes for more. It makes for more. If I can cut a corner and I get away with it, the problem is I got away with it. It'd be better, I'd be damn near better off if I didn't get away with it, because I'm such an alcoholic that I got away with it, I'm gonna try to do it again. That's just kind of how I'm wired. Or we may just procrastinate, telling ourselves the time is not yet, when in reality, we have already passed up many a fine chance to right a serious wrong. So ask yourself that question. Have you passed up many opportunities to right serious wrongs? I don't know how long some of you have been sober. I've never seen no one relapse after making all their amends. I heard my sponsor say there's a big difference between making all of my amends and making one less than all of my amends. There's a big difference. Big difference. You understand? It's a big difference. Telling ourselves the time is not yet, when in reality we have already passed up many a fine chance to right a serious wrong. Let's not talk prudence while practicing evasion. Are you evading your amends? You don't have to tell me to ask yourself that question. I've done that. I promise. The amends that I owe today are the harms I've committed in my sobriety. My amends that I've drank and did all kinds of crazy stuff for 20 years. And as far as I can tell, until God lets me, until more is revealed, I have made all of my amends in regards to the things I'd done while I was drinking. Do I have some new amends to make? Yep. I've been sober 16 years and I ain't got it licked yet. Maybe next year. I still do things. I'm still inconsiderate. I still say things, and I'm driven. And I was talking with the guy today, and we were talking about what happens when we get away from God, and how we alcoholics get close to God or stay full with God is we have a program. And when I get away from the program, then the emptiness is there. And I am going to subconsciously try to use different things and people to try to fill my emptiness. And we were talking about that, and he said, oh, I've done that before. I said, I do it twice a week. We're not cured of alcoholism. We have a daily reprieve. And so at any given time in my sobriety, I have gotten very strange. We like to call it weird. I get very weird. And what that means is I get untreated. I get very dry. I get crusty. And a lot of times I don't even know that I don't even know that I've gotten that way. And usually it's something in life will happen, a blow up or something, financial problems a lot of times will indicate to me that something else is going on. Almost inevitably. Something else that happens in life. And what I'll do, because I'm so selfish, is I will hyper focus on what that particular indicator may be instead of thinking about causes and conditions. Meaning I'll pick the fruit instead of get to the root. Right? And so ask yourselves, I know there's a couple brand new sober people in here, but what's keeping you from finishing all your amends? You busy? You too busy? You don't want to pay the money back because you won't be able to go fishing this weekend? Or, I don't know. And so it's been said that if you owe money, it's not your money anyway. And I promise that in my experiences, I'm not rich. I don't make a ton of money. I make enough, but I have some cool things. And I've been able to enjoy things that I would not be able to enjoy without an appropriate amount of finances. And so that came for me, the financial freedom, if you want to call it that, or maybe a poor articulation of what I'm trying to describe, but I got more money. I made more money. My money went longer. I had more security around money when I paid the money back to the people I owed. It's very counterintuitive. It's very spiritual. Sometimes I get weird around money. I start thinking about it too much, which just means I'm a little untreated. And what I found is that there's a promise in these amends is that financial people feel if people in economic insecurity will leave us. And you know who's economically secure? Who are the people who are financially secure? The people who are financially secure are the people who are financially secure. That's just what it is, right? And so if you're not rich and you don't have endless money, then sometimes money's going to be a thing. It's just what it is. And so at this point in our sobriety, at this point in our step work, what we come to realize, the promise is there because why is that promise there? The promise is there because what we're learning by this time in the step work is that God is going to take care of all of my needs. And there's a great security in that. The big book will call that one of them sixth senses, right? The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. And so when we get weird around money, it's a tool that we have. It's not pleasant at times, but it's really an opportunity for us to grow closer to God. If you make $10 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, you make $400. That's all you make. And you got $500 worth of bills. How's that going to work? It ain't. And your mind knows that. But I've seen amazing things happen in Alcoholics Anonymous where the money went longer than it should. I've seen in my life where I've able to go to dinner. I mean, early sobriety, I never even, if somebody else didn't buy, I wasn't going. And somehow my finances last longer and I'm able to buy gifts for people on their birthdays and Christmases and stuff like that where it doesn't make sense to me. And I think that some degree that we all overlook that during Christmas time. We all spend our money all year long and we're tight to some degree, and then here comes Christmas and then we're thinking about all the gifts we got to get for everybody, and somehow we're able to get gifts for everybody and still make all our bills. And how does that happen? God makes that happen. It's like a great representation of that principle happens for us at Christmas, right? Ironically, the guy on my first couple days sobriety said to me, "Every day's like Christmas." What does that mean? And he said every day that we're sober is a gift. And it really is. It really, really is. And so when I get weird around money, what I do is I give it away. It seems to work for me very well. And I become more charitable. I pick up the tabs when we're out to dinner, or I'll pay for the gas or whatever. I'll try to use my money to be helpful or to be generous with it. And when I do that, my attachment to it, I loosen. I loosen my attachment to it. And when I loosen my attachment to it, God has a bigger and better opportunity to show up in my life. And so it's not about I have to do more, gain more. It's more about I have to be less. Less of me makes more of God. It's a program of subtracting. Subtracting what? Me. Getting me out of the way. And the humility it takes to make some of these amends that's going to happen here. It's going to be a big deal. I'll tell you about a couple of the amends I made. My very first amends I made was the one that I remember was Giant Eagle. It's a grocery store. And in the middle of the night, when I was drinking, I would go to the Giant Eagle over there on Waterloo Road, and I'd just fill up a cart of stuff and steal it. I did it all the time. And I'd go in there. And back then, you could write the check, and you probably still can. I haven't wrote checks in a long time, but you could write the check for 30 or 50 bucks over to what the groceries cost. And so I would do that a lot too. And I did it so much that they said I can't never come back to Giant Eagle ever again. And so consequently, they came up. It was a big one. And I went to Giant Eagle on a Sunday after church. And I took a friend with me because I thought I was going to go to jail. This is what I really thought was going to happen. And I went into the Giant Eagle and I asked to see a manager. And in my mind, it was all, I thought it was going to be this extravagant meeting thing that was going to happen. And the manager came and I thought she was going to have me come to the office, but it was just right in the middle of the damn aisle. And she asked me what was going on, and I told her I owed amends. And she looked at me funny, and then I got to tell her about the groceries that I stole and the bad checks that I wrote. And I got to tell her all those things, and she looked at me, and the first thing she said was, "Do you want to shop here again?" And I said, "No. I know I'm not allowed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here." And I said, "What can I do to make it right?" And you know what happened? The craziest thing in the world. She started crying. She started crying, and she grabbed a hold of me and hugged me like I was her brother or something. It was amazing. And I walked away from that amends, which was very early in sobriety. And I remember walking back out to the car, and I felt like something was missing. And I didn't know what it was. And it took me a couple days to understand what was going on. And what was going on, what I learned in that amends, which carried with me for the rest of my sobriety, is that I've been living off of and being fueled off of the shame and guilt and all the remorse of all the poor decisions I had made. It had become a part of me. And I got used to it, just like this unmanageability, just like the spiritual malady that we talk about in the first step. I then got used to it. My alcoholic life seemed the only normal one. I couldn't differentiate the true from the false because I've been living with it for so long. And so the guilt and the shame and the remorse was just a part of me. And I got a little bit of that off of me in that amends. And when I walked out of that store, and I was excited, but I felt like something was missing. And what was missing, I found out a couple of days later, was the guilt and the shame and the remorse. And it was a little bit awkward for me to feel free in that way because I had never had that before. Giant Eagle will not allow me to pay them back. It's something they write off or something like that. And so that's where there becomes the talk of living amends, where if there's opportunities to take care of a finance somewhere and if I have the ability to do it and I owe the money, that I'm to do it. And so if you live a life of alcoholism at the depths that I did, you're not, the idea of remembering every amends that you owe is almost unlikely. Every single day I was doing stuff. And to the very best of my ability, I've made all of my amends. But I know for sure that I can't remember them all. And so what I do, this is the living amends. I try to be as helpful as I possibly can wherever I'm at. Whatever I'm doing. I get to show guys how to go fishing and what poles to buy and where to go. And I get to introduce them to new hobbies, and we go bowling and we're at jobs, and sometimes people need a little extra done. Whatever I can do to be a servant in that way, it's my way of making a living amends. And I am responsible for that. And so I sometimes believe that a living amends is abused. It's a negotiating tool that I use with myself to not make the damn amends. Another amends I made, there's a big old church in downtown Akron called the Chapel. Big old church, downtown Akron. On Sunday after church was over and everybody left, the doors were open and I went in there and I stole the sound equipment for the damn church.
That's crazy.
I know, bro. And so I'd go in, I'd grab the receiver, and I'd go out and hide it in the bushes. And I go in, I grab some speakers, and I hide them in the bushes. And I go back in and get the microphone and hide it in the bushes. And I got it all hid in the bushes, and I called a cab. The cab took me to where we go. And obviously it was a big one. And this is a life-changing one for me because when I got sober, it was on my list. And I called him up and asked, could I speak to the pastor, and told him I owed amends and scheduled an appointment. And I went down to meet the pastor, and I was prepared to do whatever it took. And I told him what I had done. I waited till everybody left. The doors were open, and I went in and I stole this and put it in the bushes. I stole that and put it in the bushes. And I called a cab. And I went to where we went. And I asked him if there's anything else. There was nothing else, obviously. And then I asked him this question. And I said, I have no idea what that cost. What could I possibly do to make this right? And the craziest thing in the whole wide world happened, and I don't want to cry. I'm trying not to. But the pastor said, I want you to know the forgiveness and the love of God. You don't owe us a single thing. And it messed me up. It messed me up. Because I would have rather just paid the damn money than having to tell me that. And so I walked away from that immense considering of like the damn life of pi or something like that. Like, what is going on? I don't understand it. And that pastor was dialed in enough that day to preach a gospel message to me, the crook and the drunk, to come in to make amends for stealing the damn sound equipment for the church. And he wanted to make sure that I knew the love and forgiveness. What he said, I want you to know the love and forgiveness of Christ. Messed me up. Messed me up. But it was deep. It's deep within me. You see? There's been some other amends. I prayed a prayer, and I think I talked to you guys about this last week when I was 5 years sober, something like that. God, it was Joe Hawk that mentioned this prayer. He said, don't pray this prayer unless you mean it. And the prayer goes, God, please show me what my unfinished amends has to do with me taking a drink. And so I was all rowdy and thought I could, and I got to praying the prayer. And then what happened was I got all crazy. I couldn't sleep. I started having nightmares about things I had done that I had forgot about. I mean, it was just torturous. I remember I went to to the Home Depot, and I had stole a credit card, and I would go in there and tell people I'd buy their items if they just give me half the money in cash.
I need you now.
Huh?
I said, I need you now.
So I went in, and there was a Oriental fella, and he was buying roofing material, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. And I said, I'll buy all your roofing material if you just give me half in cash. And I swindled my way into making that deal happen and somehow gained his trust. And he ordered thousands of dollars worth of items from Home Depot. And he had a little car, so he couldn't take it with him. And I was like, this is perfect. And so bought the items. He got a receipt, but I got the fake credit card. And he left, and when he left, I canceled the items, but he gave me the money. I couldn't get the damn dude out of my head. I having nightmares about it, and it was bugging me out. And I remember I'm a construction guy now, and I was at Home Depot getting something for a job, and there was an Oriental fella in there. And I was like, oh, this is torture. I can't take it. And so I followed the poor little fella out to his car, and I was like, can I help you load your stuff in your truck? And he was like, get the hell away from me. What's wrong with you? It tore me up. And then I told you about my grandparents. I've made graveside amends with them. Very, very powerful. The other night on the way to Arrow, the treatment center meeting, I called my Aunt Stacy. My grandparents told me, I believe intuitively, that what I'm to do to make it right is to reach out to their children. And my Aunt Stacy is one of their children. And so I called my Aunt Stacy and I talked to her for about a half an hour. And then I got off the phone and I was almost to tears because I knew for sure that had it not been for God in this program, that I would not be having that conversation with my Aunt Stacy. And I knew for sure that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And I knew it so much so that it made tears well up my eyes. My mother she's still ripping and running, doing the things that we do, which is tough. And I made amends to my mom for being, wild and keeping her up at night and all those different things. My mom was very detached. She's still drinking and doing drugs and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember it was a tough childhood. I'm not a victim, but it was just very tough. And there was no affection or no love in that way that I know and have seen. I sponsor a lot of people and I see their parents love them sometimes to death. And I'm intrigued by the mother's love for their children because I didn't really experience it. And so I'm intrigued by it, and I see it, and I talk to the moms, and I talk to the dads of the guys that I've sponsored, and some of the girls that I've sponsored, and I'm just like, wow. I know that there's someone told me that the Bible would say that can a mother forget her suckling child? And the answer to that question is yes. And then the next statement is that God says, but I will never forget you. And so I had a foster mother that loved me like, I think she might love me more than her own damn kids. I mean that. Made amends to my mom. She's not capable. I didn't expect anything. She's not capable. But I would remember this, that she did something that she never did before. We were driving in her car. That's what the time that she would give me. It's just her way. We're driving to the store. We couldn't just sit down to the table or nothing like that. It just wasn't, we were gonna go to the store. And so on the way to the store, I'm trying to get all this stuff and tell her everything. And I remember we pulled up to the stop sign and I asked her, what could I do to make it right? And my mother did something that she'd never done before. She reached over and she put her hand on my face and told me that she loved me and that it was okay. I've been waiting for that my whole damn life. That little touch from my mother filled parts of me that I didn't even know were there. You see? And we all have children. If you look in your relationships, remember last week we did the circle. It's still on there a little bit with the arrows. And so if you look around the relationships of the people that you hurt, 9 times out of 10, if you look around the relationship, we're going to owe amends to people that are around the people that we hurt. Because I promise you this, when I got sober, a lot of people around me's life got better. A lot of people's life got better. So if you owe amends to your wife or your husband, think about the people that are close to them. Did they get hurt too? Did you hurt them too? Remember that some of that stuff will come up in our conduct inventory, right? We look around our relationships, look around our sexual escapades or just in our conduct. Look around it. What about the kids that were involved? Did you hurt them? The sisters and the brothers and the moms and the dads. You see? What's it say? Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And if we skimp on these amends, we miss out on our real purpose. And so your real purpose is to be of maximum service to God and the people about you. And if you skip out on your amends, you're going to get a damn new purpose. The damn new purpose might be make a bunch of money, hook up with her or him, get in a new, I got to be in a relationship. I'm a couple years sober. I have to be with somebody, right? That's what we do. If I don't make my amends and create this place where I can be of maximum service to God and the people about me, consequently, I will try to find a new purpose and won't even know I do it. And I'll do it in AA. And I'll do it from the podium. And I'll do it while I'm sponsoring. And I'll do it in all these years of my life and not even know I'm doing it. Are you of maximum service to God and the people about you? That's something for you to ask yourself. How are you showing up to work? How are you showing up at home? How are you showing up in your friendships? A lot of times it's very easy for me to be able to have friendships at arm's distance. Very shallow, unauthentic relationships. They're easy. You don't tell me, I won't tell you nothing about me. You don't tell me nothing about you. We'll just be cool from a distance. And there's a time and a place, and some of our relationships consequently are going to be that way. But should the people that are closest to us, should they be that way? Or am I creating an environment? Am I keeping people who I can have an effective, deep, authentic relationships with? Am I keeping them away? The only reason I would do that is because I'm afraid. Right? So we were created for relationships. I believe the purpose, if somebody was to ask me, why did God create me? I would tell anybody who asked me that question, I would say God created you to be in a relationship with him. The number one purpose. More than feeding hungry kids or service work or whatever, I believe that all that stuff is born out of that relationship. And if that relationship is that vitally important, and that's my ultimate relationship, it's an indicator of how important my relationships are with other people. You can't make everybody happy. There's no such a way. I got news for you. People don't like you. And you don't like some other people. That's how that goes. I know people don't like me, and I know I don't like some people. And that's okay. But I'm to love them. Anybody ever called me for help, I'll never, there's no way I'd ever turn them down. I've never done that. You see? So some people, it's easy to have relationships. Some people will introduce you to yourself. They will push your every single button. And those are the people we should be most thankful for because they're helping us to grow. You see? Any questions? Okay, let's talk about paying the money back. We must lose our fear of our creditors no matter how far we have to go. For we're liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. Who do you owe money to? Is it 20 bucks? 200 bucks, 2,000 bucks, 20,000 bucks. I don't care what the number is. Who do you just ask yourself in this moment, in this workshop right now, who do you owe money to? Put them on your list. Pay the money back. What's it say? You will be amazed before you are halfway through. I promise, this is a spiritual program. We're not going to be able to reason the outcomes. You're not going to, we're going to reason our outcome, and it's going to be, I'm not going to have enough money. If I reason the outcome, I can't pay the money back because I'm not going to make my bills. That's the best I'm going to come up with in regards to my creditors. God has a way. It's a very spiritual program. I've seen amazing things happen. My sponsor stole from his job and had to make amends to the job that he still worked at for stealing, and he paid it back. He got a new job. He says 5 years later, he seen the fella at a restaurant and his business wasn't going good, and he told the guy I'd buy the business. And he worked for 5 years. He bought the business. They ended up opening 4 more stores, and my sponsor is decently taken care of financially as a result of making the amends, of paying the money back. Paying the money back. I have a decent credit score today. When I got sober, I was like 300-400 maybe, if I was lucky. I don't like owing. I have grown in Alcoholics Anonymous in a way where I can be, to some degree, financially independent. And that does not come by, my financial independence does not come from how much money I make. That's what we think. It's not true. My financial independence is a result of paying the money back and being a good steward. I'm not always that way, I promise you. Okay, any questions? Steve? Any of them, yeah.
So like, what about an instance where you cleaned your side of the street? Like that, you know about it, but the guy was erratic. And I thought he wanted to fight, so I was gonna whoop him, and decided to make the amends instead. And he agreed, but then I cleaned my side of the street, and he still wanted to fucking keep coming after me. And so, you know, then he just wanted to leave it at that pretty much, and I felt, like you were talking about, maybe I had some sort of freedom leaving there, because I thought that I did the right thing, but I don't know how, if that amends is completed, or if that's, I still owe him more.
I don't know the situation well enough to know the details of it. We have to talk about it a little bit more. For sake of the few minutes we have left here, we don't think we could.
Well, in a compacted statement, if you clean your side of the street and they don't wanna accept your amends.
That's Big Book is pretty clear about, there's nothing you could do about that.
Right.
Yeah. But I really have found that almost inevitably, 1 second, Chris, I see you got your hand up. The Big Book would say this: 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. Meaning, 90% of the time that you think you know what's going to happen, you're going to be wrong. Okay, Chris, and then Maya.
To answer your question, we made our demonstration and done our part, because like actually, it should not matter however someone does throw us out of their office or doesn't accept it. Well, guess what? We made our demonstration and done our part. It's water over the dam. In other words, whether they accept it, once you make that amends, it's out of your hands. You have no control over how that person responds.
I agree with Chris.
Powerless.
Nothing you can do. Maya?
Okay, so what if it's like a situation where, I'm just gonna use child services. What if you have a resentment against child services for say you were taken away or whatever reason, and they were right, and you're still angry at that? What would you do then? Like, how would you make your amends then, if they're on your resentment list?
Well, you got to look at your mistakes. Okay? And we make amends for our wrongs. If we don't have any wrongs, I'm not saying that you do or you don't, but sometimes just because I'm resentful, I've been lucky enough in sobriety, only sober, have I been able to be resentful and not owe an amend. I mean, I called somebody before I did anything. I prayed about, used the tools before I behaved inappropriately. Now, you're going to get different answers in Alcoholics Anonymous about that. Some people say if you have a resentment, you absolutely owe an amend. I disagree. I believe that we should make amends for the harms that we've done. And just because I'm resentful does not mean I need to go to Jan and say, Jan, I got to make amends to you. I was resentful. You was late last week. What good is that going to do? I'm not resentful, Jan. I love you. But just...
So it's just for your wrongdoings?
Yeah. So if I haven't done anything, I don't know the circumstances or situation, but Corey B?
Financial amends, like what about like student loans or credit card debt?
I'm a fan of paying the money back. I really am. I really am a fan of paying the money back because I believe there's a freedom in that although it seems daunting and overwhelming, and if I try to manage it and reason it out myself, it seems near impossible. But when I got sober, my driver's license were suspended for 7 years with a $10,000 fine. It was fines all added up about 10 grand. And somehow, when the year I got sober was my 7 years suspension was up, which is, I just couldn't thought that up. And I paid the $10,000 back before I was a year sober. It doesn't even, like I could tell you that today because I know it's true, but it seems like that just doesn't even make sense. It seems impossible to me, but it happened. And so I'm a fan of paying your money back. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know when the appropriate time to file bankruptcy and all that different kind of stuff is. I have no idea. But even if you do, I still am a fan of paying the money back. If you owe the money, pay the money back. Dylan?
Alright, so, does it
looking at a lot of time if I go in there and I'm like, hey, look, I did this. But I go in there and I give him the money, and I don't even necessarily specifically say why I'm giving him the money. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still making my direct amends, right? Like, I don't have, like, that would close that amends, as long as they're paid back.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I've been sitting on this since I made my list when I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I've been putting money away to pay it back. But when I get to that point, like, I don't wanna incriminate myself by going in there and saying, you know what I mean? But I wanna make sure he gets the money back. I just don't know if you see that as, you know, I mean, I made the amends, like, check it off after it's paid.
So there's different circumstances, and there's, you know, I don't think there's an absolute answer to each one of those kind of questions. Meaning, I don't know the circumstances. I can tell you this. There's crimes that I've committed, 100%, that would land me in jail. When I got sober, I think I was 6 or 7, 8 months sober, and I got custody of my little girl. I'm a single dad. Her mom's off doing whatever. I'm the dad. And I knew for sure at that time, although I was willing, that if I was to go and turn myself in, it would do my daughter great deals of harm. You see? And so I did not go and do that in that way. There's different ways I kind of went about that. You see? And I don't know the circumstances enough to tell you what that is, but I'm sure your sponsor, or I'll be glad to talk to you about it. But I know that it would not do any good. So I did not go throw myself in the jail. That would be to some degree dumb. My little girl's counting on me, and I couldn't do that. And so I had to kind of take a different route.
When it talks about injure them or others, that includes yourself.
That could be tricky. That's controversial. It says them or others. It don't say or myself. Yeah. It don't say it except when to do so would injure me and others. But if I had been a single man and had no other, maybe my sponsor at the time would say, you need to go make that right. You need to go face it. Are you willing to go to any length? Maybe he would have said that. I don't know. But there was people who were counting on me that didn't have a say-so in the matter. And that's as a result of that. So just to answer your question, directly, it doesn't say, except when to do so would injure me or others. It says, yes. Thanks, Nikki. Okay, we got another one. Justin?
At that time,
Thanks, Justin. Okay, just a couple quick reads real quick and we'll wrap this thing up tonight. Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. I want to encourage you to make direct amends. I want to encourage you that if you're wrong, admit your wrongs. Admit your faults. Admit your motives. It creates a great place for forgiveness and healing. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. These are terms that are written in our amends portion of our big book. And so I know that that statement can be used in a lot of different other places, and it's very applicable. But I want you just to notice that this statement is made in direct proportion to making our amends. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Meaning, when it comes to being terrified of making amends, I sometimes am going to revert back to my own way. I'm going to revert back to me managing. And the big book reminds me that the spiritual life is not a theory and that I have to live it. This is required. It's not steps 1 through 7, skip a few, then 10, 11, and 12. Okay? We don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. I don't think and I'm going to keep reading. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anybody. And so you will gain a sense of yourself back. Your esteem will be restored. Your confidence will be restored. This is very important. It's going to be very difficult to go out and be of maximum service to God and others if you don't feel good about yourself. It's going to be a little bit harder if you don't have the confidence to do so. You see? Then obviously the promises. I'm going to read them and then we're going to wrap this thing up. We're painstaking about this phase of our development. We will be amazed before we're halfway through. Halfway through with what? Making our amends. And so here's what happens when we talk about, we was at the damn sober house the other day and somebody read the damn promises and then when it got down to the end, it says, are these extravagant promises? All the new people said, I think not. I was like, well, how the hell do you know? Right? Right? They just been hearing it. And I only bring that up because we all can experience this if we do the work, right? We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We'll comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Now, these promises, which are the 9th step promises, are read at most meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so for the next couple of weeks, when you hear these promises read, they're read so much, we just hear them and don't even think about them. And so when they're reading them at the meetings for the next couple of weeks, consider the extravagance of those promises. And sometimes you'll see me at the meeting, they'll read the promise, they'll say, are these extravagant promises? And everybody will say, we think not. And I'll be shaking my head like, yes, they're extremely extravagant promises. The only reason we think not is because we got to experience them by making our amends. They come true for us. This sixth sense, this amazing things are happening when I start making my amends and I get to experience them and they become almost normal. But it does not take away the fact that these things are very extravagant. Very, very extravagant. Any questions? Let's pray it out. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, glory forever. Amen.